Hey everybody, Cory from Aquariumcoop.com. Today, we're talking about carbon. I think we all kind of know, like, yeah, it's that black stuff you put in an aquarium filter. What it typically is made from is either like coconut husk or some byproduct of like some other wood manufacturing type of thing. And you have to get it insanely hot and char it without providing it oxygen. And what this does, it creates a ton of little like micro holes in it. Super fine Swiss cheese, right? Just tiny, tiny little holes, and that's what it is. So fine that it can collect things out of the air. That's why we can use HEPA filtration and that kind of stuff, or to remove smells from a room, right? Because there's particles there. Same thing in the water. So with all those super fine pores, we can physically collect things, very tiny micron level stuff. So we get kind of a chemical reaction out of it, and we also get a physical reaction out of it, kind of like we normally would in our aquarium filters. We have mechanical filtration and we have chemical filtration. Carbon is always considered a chemical filtration item. It actually is mechanical as well. So if you wanted to get the very finest particles out of your water, one of the best ways to do that would be carbon. So we know we've got this like crazy skeletal mesh basically, and you can have it in an impregnated pad, you can have it in little pellets. When you have some in there, it's going to process stuff out. That could be tannins from water, you know, so you got a bunch of brown water in there just because we got a lot of wood. Also, we can absorb things like iron, where in a planet aquarium that would be a negative thing. Okay, we can also absorb ammonia. I believe it does more good than bad. That being said, I think there is a lot missing to optimize it and understand it. I've read studies that have claimed that it's only useful for like a day in an aquarium. I've read studies that it's useful for a month. I've read studies that it never goes bad technically. Technically, you could grow beneficial bacteria on it and it would be useful. I get that. Okay, you have 3 Oscars and a 55. I have 30 neon tetras and a planted aquarium. The waste levels are going to be very different. The amount of maybe mold or particles in the water might be different. Let's say you're on well water and you naturally had a lot of phosphate in that water. That would get pulled out by carbon, right? So carbon would be doing you a lot of good things in that Oscar tank. And then over in this planet tank, we wouldn't have nearly as many fines. We still would have fines. We probably wouldn't have ammonia and phosphate buildup though, because the plants would be consuming it. So the plants would kind of be doing some of the job that carbon would have done for us. And we get nice pretty plants to look at. Really, there needs to be like a scale of usefulness of like big dirty fish, more useful, planted tank, less useful. If carbon was absolutely free, would I use it? And currently at the store, no, because I don't have a good way to use it. Like I'm using the Zis filters or sponge filters. So I even if it was free, I wouldn't use it. At home, I had some for free. It comes with the, the hang-on backs you buy. I didn't even use it. Because it takes up space, I wanted more sponge filter or more media there, right? Something I would use long term instead of a shorter term thing. Let's say I dosed a med, fish reacted very poorly to it. One of the first things I would do would be do a larger water change, maybe 50%, and get carbon in there right away to help absorb, hopefully, the remainder of it as fast as I can. So the other times in the maintenance world where I used to maintenance aquariums, people that were going to restain their floors or have their like the inside of their house painted, all that kind of stuff, and we weren't able to move the aquarium to a different room, I would pretty much load these aquariums up with as much carbon as I could so that if contaminants got into the water, we had ways to pull it out. Now that being said, I would always tell them I want to do this like the day or the night before we start painting or putting down finish on the floor, that type of thing, because I didn't want them to get exhausted on what was already in the aquarium. I think we need more testing as a hobbyist on what makes sense. So is it 1 pound per 10 gallons per month leads to crystal clear water, gets rid of all smells, and works great in planet tanks, works great in Oscar tanks, like all that? Or is it half a pound? Or is it 1/4 of a pound? Best practices that I've read where you want at least 100 micron filtration going before it would get to carbon. The average freshwater aquarium wouldn't have that. Canister filters, most canister filters like, hey, put this bag of it in there. I don't feel like we're getting enough pre-filtration to get maximum use out of carbon. Do we have to have it? I think the answer is no. I don't think it's harmful. And I don't think anyone that is using it necessarily shouldn't be using it. If you had a budget, I would tell you this is not a budget critical item. If you were having to make some cuts, it'd be hard pressed for me to say you should buy that. As a person that sells products, we don't even really sell carbon. It's like we do sell the pads because I like the pads a lot. I really like the pads. I should explain why I like the pads. I was like, I'm not going to get into that, but I'm like, no, it makes perfect sense. This is the one time to get into it. Imagine a big box that looks like an AquaClear 110 sponge. So if you have this big sponge sitting in the basket, and then you put this carbon log that Fluval sells on it, right? We can get it to stay there. There is bypass. Water can go here, it can go over here, it can go up around the corners, right? Any water that doesn't go directly through this carbon log will not be getting filtered. So that is why I don't like bagged carbon. I like the pads better, and here's why. So this is not a carbon infused pad. We do sell them, and they look similar to this, all right? A carbon infused pad that we would sell would be twice as long, and you would cut it to fit. And that's the important part, is cut it to fit. Another reason that I would use a pad like this is one of the only ways that I can really use carbon in a tank that's a sponge filter. If this was a sponge filter and it had an air stone in it and it was just bubbling, I can take a carbon pad and wrap it around it and put a, obviously this would have been longer, I get it, and put like a rubber band around it. Now you've got a filter that normally you could never run carbon very easily, running carbon and polishing the water, cleaning it up for you, getting those meds out. Dang near everything on the planet's made out of carbon, so there's that weird kind of fact. Plants need carbon to grow. In a house plant, putting carbon into the soil can help sometimes because it'll absorb minerals and hold on to it, and then the root attaches to it and then it pulls minerals out of it. But in an aquarium, the way we use carbon isn't really beneficial, even though it's the same carbon. So because we keep the carbon separated from the plants, it's never going to be able to attach on like a root, right? So it's never going to be able to extract those minerals from that. Oxygen has carbon dioxide in it, right? So in the air we breathe, there's carbon dioxide. And because we put air into water, we also get carbon in water with it, or CO2, carbon dioxide, right? Any given water, whether it's a fish tank or not, there's going to be oxygen and there's going to be some CO2 in there. And those levels are going to move around based on what's going on. If there's plants in there during the day, they're making they're making oxygen using CO2. At night, they're consuming oxygen and making CO2. By running an air stone, I believe it is like a very low-end CO2 injection system. So it gets weird and it's super confusing. So I think it's best, and that's why like our easy carbon in bold letters says algicide. We market it as an algicide, and it's our direct attempt to help educate as many people as we can. Because I don't think anyone needs that product, but the people that are using it need to know what it is. So
we hope you enjoyed this video. To watch another one just like this, click here.